Chapter 5. The Old Man. Noah opened his eyes. It no longer felt as if all the puppets were crowding in on him, preparing to bury him beneath the weight of their bodies. The muttering had gone. The whispers had vanished. Instead, they all seemed to have returned to their rightful places on the shelves, and he realised how ridiculous it was even to have thought they were watching him or talking about him. They weren't real after all. They were only puppets. But what was real was the elderly man who had spoken to him and who was now standing only a few feet away, smiling a little, as if he'd been expecting this visit for a very long time and was pleased that it had finally come to pass. He was holding a small block of wood in his hands and was chipping away at it with a small chisel as he stood there. Noah swallowed quickly out of nervousness and, without meaning to, let out a sudden cry of surprise. "Oh dear," said the man, looking up from his work. "There's no need for that, surely." "But there was no one here a moment ago," said Noah, looking around in astonishment. The door through which he had entered the shop was still nowhere to be seen, so where this man had appeared from was a mystery to him. "And I didn't hear you come in." "I didn't mean to startle you," said the man, who was very old, even older than Noah's grandfather, with a mop of yellow hair that looked like porridge mixed with maize. He had very bright eyes that Noah found himself staring into, but the skin on his face was as wrinkled as any the boy had ever seen. "I was downstairs working, that's all, and then I heard footsteps, so I thought I'd better come up and see whether a customer needed my attention." "I heard footsteps too," said Noah, "but I'm sure they were your footsteps climbing the stairs." "Oh dear me, no," said the old man, shaking his head. "I could hardly have heard my own footsteps, then come up to investigate, could I? They must have been your footsteps." "But you were downstairs. You said as much." "Did I?" asked the old man, frowning and stroking his chin as he thought about it. "I don't remember. It's all so long ago now, isn't it? And I'm afraid my memory isn't what it once was. Perhaps I heard the bell over the door ring." "But there was no bell," said Noah, and at that precise moment, as if it had just remembered its job, a cheerful "ping" sounded from above the door, which had now reappeared a few feet behind him. "It's old too," explained the old man with an apologetic shrug. "You wouldn't mind if it wasn't the only thing it had to do all day, but it forgets sometimes. That might not even have been for you. It was ringing. It could be for a customer from last year." Noah turned around, open-mouthed, and stared at the bell in surprise before turning back and swallowing loudly, unsure what he could possibly say to make sense of what had just taken place. "Anyway, I'm sorry I kept you waiting for so long," said the old man, "but I'm afraid I move like a snail these days. It's not like it was when I was a young man. You wouldn't have seen me for dust back then. Dmitri Capaldi had nothing on me." "It's all right," said Noah, shrugging his shoulders. "I haven't been here for very long at all. It wasn't even 11 o'clock when I came inside and—" "Oh!" He glanced at his watch, which told him that it was almost noon. "But it can't be." "I'm sure it can," said the old man. "You just lost track of time, that's all." "A whole hour?" "It happens. I lost track of a year once, if you can believe that. I put it down here somewhere, and when I went looking for it later, it was nowhere to be found. I always feel it will show up one of these days, though, just when I least expect it." Noah frowned, not sure he'd heard this correctly. "How does someone lose track of a year?" he asked. "Oh, it's easier than you think," said the old man, putting down the block of wood he'd been holding in his left hand and the chisel he'd been holding in his right, as he took off his glasses and wiped the lenses with a rainbow-coloured handkerchief. Although perhaps it wasn't a ear at all. Perhaps it was an ear. He pressed both hands to the sides of his head and tugged on his earlobes. "No, all in place there," he said, sounding satisfied. "It was definitely a ear. Not to worry." Noah stared at the old man and tried to understand what he was talking about. None of it made any sense to him, and he suspected that asking questions would only make matters even more confusing. "It must have been all the toys," said Noah, pointing at the walls around him. "I was looking at them for a long time, I suppose, and all the puppets. There are so many of them. They distracted me." "That's right," said the old man with a sigh. "Blame the puppets. People always do." "I'm not blaming them," said Noah. "I just mean that I got caught up looking at them, that's all. They're so lifelike, and time ran away with itself." "The important thing is that you're here now," said the old man, a great smile spreading across his face. "Do you know, it's been so long since I had a customer, I'm not even sure I know what to do with one. I'm afraid we have no official greeter anymore." "That's all right," said Noah, who always felt sorry for people who had to stand outside shops saying, "Welcome to, welcome to, welcome to." It seemed like such a miserable way to pass the time. "Of course, if I'd made it upstairs quicker, then I could have invited you to lunch, but it's too late for that now." Noah's face fell. His stomach was rumbling audibly, and he had to cough to cover the embarrassing sounds it was making. Then he changed his mind, thinking that if the old man heard it rumbling, he might change his mind and feed him after all. "Anyway, now that you are here," continued the old man, "I'm sure that you must have a reason for your visit. Did you want to buy something?" "Probably not," said Noah, looking down at the floor and feeling a little ashamed. "I don't have any money, I'm afraid." A wooden mouse was sitting at his feet, painted grey and pink, sniffing a little at the toes of his shoes, but the moment he caught its eye, it jumped a little, squeaked in surprise, and ran away to hide beneath the legs of a wooden giraffe in the corner of the shop. "Then might I ask what brought you in here? Shouldn't you be in school?" "No, I don't go to school anymore," said Noah. "But you're just a boy," said the old man, "and boys should be in school. Or have they changed the law since I was your age? Not that I'm one to talk, of course. I spent very little time there myself. I was always running off. I can't tell you the amount of trouble I got into because of it." "What kind of trouble?" asked Noah, intrigued. Now, because he always liked to hear about the trouble other people got into. "Oh, I never talk about the past on an empty stomach," said the old man. "I haven't even had my lunch yet." "But you said—" "Anyway, I want to know what brought you in here." "Well, at first it was the tree," replied the boy. "The one outside your door. I was standing on the opposite side of the street, just looking across at it, and I thought it was quite the most impressive tree I had ever seen in my life. I don't know why exactly. I just had a feeling about it, that's all." "I'm glad you like it," said the old man. "My father planted it, you know, the day we moved here. He was very fond of trees. He planted several others in the village, but I think this is the best of the bunch. People tell the most extraordinary stories about it." "Yes, I think I heard one," said Noah enthusiastically. "Really?" asked the old man, raising an eyebrow. "Might I ask where from?" "There was a very helpful Dachshund across the street," replied Noah, "and a very hungry donkey. He said that the tree is stripped bare every few nights and somehow managed to sprout new branches within a day or two. He said that no one knows how or why it happens." "Oh, he's full of stories, that one," said the old man, laughing. "He's an old friend of mine. I wouldn't mind what he says, though. Dutch hands make up the most extraordinary tales. And as for that donkey, well, don't get me started. When most people settle for 12 to 15 meals a day, he needs to have 3 or 4 times that number, or he gets weepy." 12 to 15 meals a day? Asked Noah in surprise. "I can assure you that I never have." "Anyway, for all the people who tell some tale about this shop," said the old man, interrupting him, "I can promise you that no one has ever set foot inside it." "Really?" asked the boy. "Well, until now, that is," said the old man, smiling. "You're the first one. Perhaps you were sent here for a reason. Of course, my father died many years ago, so he never got to see how tall and strong the tree grew." A shadow fell across his face as he said this, and he looked away, unsettled for a moment, as if an unhappy memory had come over him. "My father is a lumberjack," said Noah immediately. "He cuts down trees for a living." "Oh dear," said the old man. "Doesn't he like them then?" "I think he likes them very much," replied Noah. "But people need wood, don't they? Otherwise they'd have no houses to live in, or chairs to sit in, or He tried to think of something else that was made of wood, and looking around broke into an immediate smile. "Or puppets," he said. "There wouldn't be any puppets." "That's very true," said the old man, nodding slowly. "And for every tree that he cuts down he plants 10 more, added Noah. "So it's a good thing, really." "Then maybe one day, when you're as old as I am, you'll be able to walk past them and remember your father in the same way that I remember mine." Noah nodded, but frowned a little. He didn't like to think of things like that. "But I haven't introduced myself," said the old man a moment later, extending his hand and offering the boy his name. "Noah Barleywater," said Noah in reply. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Noah Barleywater," said the old man, smiling a little. The boy was about to say the same thing and opened his mouth, but then closed it almost immediately, for a wooden fly had been buzzing around his head, just waiting for an opportunity to swoop inside. And here we have Fig 3, an axe in a tree stump. He remained silent for a few moments, but finally, after staring at the old man for so long he thought he could hear his own hair starting to grow, Noah searched his brain and found his next question hiding away just over his left ear. "What are you making?" he asked, looking at the piece of wood the old man had picked up again and was chiselling away at even as they spoke. Small flakes of wood falling at his feet and being gathered up and carried away by a wooden brush and pan that moved across the floor with the grace of a pair of ballroom dancers. "It looks like some sort of rabbit, doesn't it?" said the old man, holding it up. And sure enough, it did look like a rabbit, with very large ears and a fine set of wooden whiskers. "It wasn't what I was intending to make, but there we are," he added with a sigh. "It happens every time. I start out with one idea in mind, and it ends up as something else entirely." "Why, what were you intending to make?" asked Noah. "Ah," said the old man, smiling a little, and then whistling a little tune to himself. "I'm not sure you'd believe me if I said." "Oh, I probably would," said Noah quickly. "My mother says I believe everything I'm told, and that's why I get into so much trouble." "Are you sure you want to know?" asked the old man. "Please tell me," said Noah, intrigued now. "You're not a gossip, are you?" he asked. "You won't go around telling people?" "No, of course not," said Noah. "I won't tell a single person." The old man smiled and seemed to consider it. "I wonder if I can trust you," he said quietly. "What do you think? Are you a trustworthy little boy, Noah Barleywater?"